Hello, my dears. I just wanted to take a minute and make a video for you while reviewing some of your practice cult strategy paragraphs for formal writing. As we prepare to get into our body paragraphs for our research essays, I am noticing that some of us are confusing the terms summary and elaboration. I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk to you about why this difference is even important and why we need to address this now before we continue writing throughout the rest of the semester. Okay, we will be using the novel we're currently reading right now, which is Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck, so that the body paragraph example that I give you, you will understand, and our discussion in this video will be thorough, and you will be able to apply it to your own learning. Okay, all right, so a summary. Why it's not okay for linking ideas. All right, a summary is a brief restatement of key ideas or main points, which in and of itself is neutral, not a bad thing, okay? In body paragraphs, however, supporting sentences for evidence giving and writing summaries on a topic are two separate forms of writing. Each one of these things is valid, but the two are not interchangeable, and that's what I want to address today. Okay, we know that a linking idea provides an elaboration, which is adding additional details to existing information to create a more complex and in depth analysis. If you summarize after embedding your evidence, then you're not meeting the requirements for well rounded body paragraphs. Okay. So, what I'm going to do to you, or with you rather, today is go through a practice prompt with you, retouch on the strategy skill that I would like for you to obtain in order to help us reach that in depth elaboration that we really need when it comes to supporting evidence in academic writing. So, how I'm going to roll through this with you is I'm going to give us a practice prompt, which is present here for you. Okay. Which character within Of Mice and Men best represents the motif of loneliness and isolation? All right, this prompt may seem large, right? But break it down, reread it. What exactly is this prompt asking? Because we need to know that in order, one, to create a cohesive topic sentence, but two, to know which evidence we need to find and then how to elaborate upon that evidence. So, understanding your prompt thoroughly is the first step that we need in order to maintain good elaboration within our paragraphs. Okay. So we know that we're asking which character. Those are our first two words. Okay. We know we're looking in the novel. Best represents the motif, because remember, we're looking at six, but we're focusing on one, of loneliness and isolation. Now, we could argue that a character may not exemplify these traits. And that's okay. But what we're going to ask you to do is analyze what you believe each character embodies, and choose one that you believe at least best meets what this prompt is asking. Okay, so henceforth, right, we have our character, our motif of loneliness and isolation, and then our best representation of that motif. So we are looking at weaving these three things together in order to create one cohesive topic sentence. Okay. In order to obtain an elaboration, we've got to find evidence first. Okay. So we've been working with those Of Mice and Men interactive notebooks, where we've been practicing with figurative language and characterization. So go back and review the discussion question responses that we've been working with together and any notes that you've taken as we've been reading. Which motif do you believe is most present according to your analysis? So when I went through and I looked at some of my answers and some of my notes, I believe that Curly's wife, for me, best represents loneliness and isolation. So I already have somebody in mind that I'm going to continue to think about. We're going to then select evidence from the novel that aligns with both the character and the motif you've chosen. Because you can't talk about Curly's wife, but then talk about racism. We know that she threatens to lynch crooks at the end of chapter 4, but that doesn't really have anything straightforward to do with loneliness and isolation. Okay. Then we're going to go back and review the skill about utilizing the 5 W's to provide your linking idea or this elaboration, right? So I'm going to go through this with you as well. So we're looking at our motif. We have it. That was given to us in the prompt. That's loneliness and isolation. The character was up to us to choose. For me, that's Curly's wife. All right. Our five W's: who, what, where, when, why, sometimes how. Right. Who. We know we're talking about Curly's wife. She's the only woman Steinbeck presents in the novel. She's also quite young. What? She is flirtatious with other men. She's driven by seeking attention. She's called a tart and largely looked down upon pretty much by all present within the novel. Where this takes place on a ranch in California in Salinas Valley. If you wanted to be more specific, you could as well. Remember that this is your analysis. You will decide about how detailed it needs to be. Okay. When in the 1930s, I also chose to add, right, this is me pulling in some of my inferencing skills that we've been working on as well, right? Women's roles and rights are different from today. So if we consider her role on the ranch that she doesn't do any physical labor, her place is mostly domestic, okay? So what we do after that, okay, we've listed out what we know. There may be a whole lot more that we know, but that would be, again, up to us to decide how much detail we need to go in order to reach a connection. So if we've only listed one or two things for each, we've done an okay job. For example, where is going to be pretty limited since Curly's wife isn't in the beginning with George and Lenny near the Salinas River. She's only ever on the ranch. So we only have one where to list for her. But if we were doing George, we would put on a ranch, comma, also in the woods by the river. So one thing for where might be appropriate. However, one thing for what is kind of lacking, okay? So we need to make sure that we pull out as much that we can think of so that we come back down and go into connections. We have something to work with. Otherwise, this will feel very stagnant and we won't get as much of an elaboration that we need from it, okay? Once we have written out our five W's, we're going to go and we're going to look for connections that we can pull back into loneliness and isolation. These can be things about her character or her person that we can connect with those five W's. So, for example, the fact that she's the only woman on the ranch, she's married to Curly, who we know is a nasty person, right? Nobody on their right mind wants to be married to Curly, and she knows this. She tells this to Lenny in chapter 5, right? He ain't a nice man. But why marry him? So if we look and think about that, right, she's isolated by her gender. She's the only woman there. No one present in her life treats her with compassion. No one hugs her, comforts her, kisses her good morning. We also know that humans are social creatures. We need that contact that is derived or comes from some place of love. Without that, we kind of tend to fall apart or lash out in ways that we may or may not normally act upon, which some of us might agree with the way Curly's wife behaves within the novel. Right, because she receives no compassion or kindness from others, she lashes out angrily at the ranch hands in chapter 4 in Crooks's room, as we talked about before. Okay, nearly all information we have about her comes from the point of view of the men or the ranch hands on the novel. We get very little dialogue that actually comes from Curly's wife until chapter 5, before she's almost killed, where we finally learn about her life before she married Curly. And even then, her home life didn't seem awful, but certainly that she and her mom were not super close either. And all of this just comes from thinking about who and where and what she is interacting with and where she has come from as well. So, utilizing those five W's. And I don't expect this to be an instantaneous skill, which is why we write it down. When we look at something, we are able to contemplate upon it. Okay. The last thing I wrote down is perhaps she seeks attention with her looks and is flirtatious because she is lonely. Boom. Loneliness is one of the things that we need to tie back in. So the connections we have from what we've pulled out of our five W's are able to help elaborate on the evidence that we will choose. I've written an example paragraph for you, so I will show you how I pull from this PowerPoint page right here into our formal writing. Okay, so here is the application of this strategy. As we know with our cult strategy, okay, we have our topic sentence first. This should contain the language of the prompt, as well as our thesis point. But in this case, that would be the character we've chosen. Okay, so this is in red. The character that best represents the motif of loneliness and isolation within the novel of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck is Curly's wife. Next, we embed our evidence properly in MLA 8. Steinbeck states, comma, well, I ain't giving you no trouble. Think I don't like to talk to somebody every once in a while? Think I like to stick in that house all the time? Curly's wife is the only woman on the ranch whose attempts at conversation and friendship are perceived as flirtatious and unwanted. Due to this, she experiences isolation in the form of her gender, as well as loneliness in the fact that she seems incapable of making friends without appearing unfaithful to Curly. Therefore, Curly's wife best exemplifies loneliness and isolation due to the conditions of the ranch and treatment from the ranch hands. Okay, so what's in green is our linking idea. What we do not see in this example paragraph is Curly's wife is yelling at Lenny, George, Crooks, and Candy in Crooks's bedroom because they don't like her being there. That would be a summary of why the evidence was spoken. But an elaboration gives us that deeper connection about how that evidence exemplifies her loneliness. Okay. When she's saying, think I don't like to talk to somebody every once in a while, remember that throughout the novel, every time she tries to speak to somebody, they tell her to go away or Curly's not there, generally making her feel unwanted. So, because we didn't just restate that while she's yelling at them because they're telling her to get out, okay, but how does that elaborate? How does that help us as readers, especially for those of us who may not have read the novel, really understand the depth of Curly's wife's loneliness and where it comes from? Okay. Um, so hopefully this skill will be a little bit easier for us to tackle in the future. I want to remind you that I do not expect perfection. I want your best try. Writing is definitely something that's a little bit like riding a bicycle. You're going to fall off a few times. But I noticed this in our writing. Before we get into the swing of research essays, I wanted us to be comfortable in elaboration instead of writing summaries. Okay. So give it your best shot. When we go back and revise the prompts that we're working on now, so what I want you to do is look at your most recent writing assignment. Double check your linking ideas. They should be in green. Are you summarizing or are you elaborating? If you have summarized, I want you to go back and rewrite it. We will go over these when I see you next. I will see you then. Please email me if you have any questions or concerns. I will post these slides on Canvas so that you have access to them always. And if you need anything or if you'd like to work with me one-on-one on a Google Meet, please let me know. I'll be happy to help you the best way that I can. All right, my dears. I'll see you later. Have a good day.